Hello, everybody. Welcome to No Cold Wars Perspectives, where we give you the 10-minute pulse of global struggles for peace, sovereignty, and social justice. I'm your host, Gisela Cernadas, and today we are turning to the world economy on occasion of the trade tariffs announced by US President Donald Trump, which have unleashed a series of debates about what is behind this move and where is the world economy going. I'm joined today by John Ross, who's a senior fellow at Chongyang Institute for Financial Studies at Renmin University of China. And as myself, he's a member of the No Cold War Collective. Thank you, John, for joining today. What brings us today here is that on the 2nd of April, President Donald Trump introduced sweeping tariffs under what he termed Liberation Day policies, establishing a baseline 10% tariff on all imports, excluding those from Canada and Mexico, and it also established reciprocal tariffs ranging from 11 to 50%, which were applied to approximately 60 countries based on perceived trade imbalances. So, tariffs have elicited widespread concern among analysts who warn of potential inflation, economic slowdown, and destabilization of global trade relationships, as well as damage to international relationships. Now, there are two questions I would like to ask you, John. The first one is about the spirit of these tariffs. Is the US government truly pushing for a renaissance of its economy, enhancing national industry through distorting prices and protecting their industry from allegedly unfair international competition? Or are these tariffs part of a bigger international picture in which the US is hitting the countries to deepen their subordination to the US interests? Or, in other words, are the tariffs motivated by economic reasons, geopolitical reasons, or a combination of both? John, it's over to you.
Well, some people see these tariffs as some sort of technical question, and they're not. They're an attempt to reorganize the entire world economy, and they will have consequences for every single country for many, many decades to come, and will determine the question largely of whether a country can pursue an independent path of development or not. What Trump is attempting to do is he is attempting to create an international trade system in which the United States unilaterally makes all the rules and takes all the decisions and can change any of the rules whenever it wants. Let's look at the present situation. I am very far, and progressive should be very far from thinking that the present World Trade Organization is perfect. It's not. It's got all sorts of imperfections, but it has some elements of multipolarity in it, multipolar discussion, because there has to be negotiations. And some countries we know have been able to develop within it, that it's not untrammeled, controlled simply by one country. Trump proposes to completely replace this with a completely different type of system in which the United States will entirely make the rules, and it will change the rules when it wants, which means that when any country has success, the United States will decide, well, we can put a stop to this success tomorrow at a whim. That's the purpose of the unilaterally imposing the tariffs. And the extraordinary way in which the tariffs has gone up and down. I mean, China's has gone up to 125%. Some countries have 60% one day, then they have 10% the next day, then they have none. And there's no control you have over the situation. It can be what the mood of the US president is. That's the attempt to create this new type, therefore, of world economy. And this will make it impossible, if it is accepted, for any country to develop really an independent path, because it will be acting on the whim of the United States. This is obviously going to affect the global South countries, which want to pursue a path of independence. For example, Vietnam, some of the successful developing countries in Asia have been hit with some of the biggest tariffs designed to slow them down. Countries in Africa can be hit suddenly by tariffs on their commodities, or Latin American countries, and anything can be put on them. And therefore, the whole international system has to oppose this. I mean, if you want to see what will happen, it's rather farcical. There is an article in the Financial Times a couple of days ago which says Europe has to choose between the United States and China. It says if we should choose the United States, I just want to not misquote, so I'll read. Choosing China would seal its fate and decline, ensure its decline about Europe. But it's the United States which has imposed the biggest decline upon Europe. What's it done? It has broken its biggest energy supply with Russia, the diktat of the United States. It has created the biggest war in Europe since 1945 in Ukraine, the dictator of the United States. It's insisted that Europe cut itself off from Chinese telecommunications like Huawei. It's plunged one of the world's strongest economies, such as Germany, into deep, big mess economically. It's not China that's created this decline. It's the United States that created this decline. And what would happen is that this system, which the United States has imposed upon Europe, would then be transferred to the entire world. Also, it's a big attack, incidentally, on the US working class. And I'm quite pleased to show that the polls in the United States show that people understand this. What has been done? The tariffs have been put up, allegedly, to rebuild US manufacturing industry. But the real reality of the thing is that the problems for the US manufacturing industry are not made in China. The decline of US manufacturing industry and the industry in the United States in general and working class living standards in the United States started long before that. It's been going on since the 1960s. Why? Because the United States has grotesque inefficiencies in its economy. It spends more on military spending than any other country in the world. Even on the official figures, it's 3.7% of GDP, according to its official figures, compared to the 2% target for the NATO. And in reality, it's much higher. As Gisela and John Bellamy Foster did the research, it's about 2% of GDP higher. That means that money is not being used for US investment. It has the grotesquely inefficient health system, whereby it spends about 18% of GDP on health, and you live about 4 years less than any other major advanced country. And so you spend about 4% of GDP more than any other advanced country. So you have a higher expenditure for a lower life expectancy. This is absolutely ridiculous. And because the United States won't tackle these, instead, in order to pursue its policies, it has to cut the living standards of the US working class. It's the choice. You can either have, in the famous phrase, you can have guns or you can have butter. And what the United States ruling class wants to have, as we can see with its proposal for $1 trillion military budget just introduced, is it wants guns, and the population of the United States will do without butter. That's the path which the United States wants to impose. So this is therefore a simultaneously attack on the US working class and on the people of the world. And the people of the world and the United States working class has an interest in defeating this attack, and the population of the United States in defeating this attack. And therefore, the problems of the United States are not made in China. The problems of the United States are made in its excessive military spending, in its grotesque health system. Ultimately, of course, they're rooted in this capitalist system, but they're the most immediate manifestations of this. And the US wants to now impose this as an attack on the entire world, because what will happen, it's been understood that the tariffs are going to put up prices. I'm pleased to see that the polls show that a majority of the population in the US, the last one I saw was 58%, 42%, understand that these tariffs are going to put up prices, and they're against this policy. So it's an attack on the world. It's an attack on the living standards of the United States. And it's not merely a technical tariff issue. This is going to attack every single country. If this policy can be got through by tariff, by Trump, if a new world trading system can be created completely under the control of the United States, this will block the path of independence and development, or can be used to block the path of independence and development for every single country in the world. So this is not a technical question at all. This is an absolutely fundamental social and economic question which is going to affect every person on the planet.
Wow, very interesting points, John. Now let's move on to the second question for today's perspectives, and let's talk about the reactions and the implications of these measures that I think you've been mentioning some of this already. So, after 1 week of announcing these tariffs, Trump called on a 90 days pause on the tariffs for those countries that have not retaliated. And thus, there are negotiations and trade agreements with the US under discussions for several countries. We also know that the case of China, with which the tariff war is escalating and has shown a significant retaliation against the US. So, could you drive us a bit more through the initial reactions to these Liberation Day policies? And what do you think are the implications for the global economy and for the people of the world?
Well, the strongest response, of course, come from China because China's the strongest country of the global south and the strongest country which the United States wishes to attack. And its response has been totally blunt, which is no, we're not going to go along with the system of the world, not merely for the interest of China, but for the rest of the world, in which everybody is subordinated to the whim of the United States. I mean, some of the things have even become grotesque. Apparently, there was a lovely report in CNN saying that the Chinese were being told that Xi Jinping should request a telephone call with Trump, which really means, of course, that Trump was requesting a telephone call with Xi Jinping. But he's so arrogant, he couldn't even pick up the phone and have a discussion about the situation, to which no telephone calls come, leading to hilarious things on which are appearing on social media. China's response is, if you're going to attack us, we will hit back. We don't want to fight. China doesn't want. It's not in interest. This is a lose-lose situation. At the moment, the biggest loser is by far the United States. Don't take my word for it or pro-China sources. Take Goldman Sachs, for example. Goldman Sachs revised down its estimates of the US economic growth in 2025 down from 2.5% to 0.5%. What does that mean? Previously, Goldman Sachs was predicting that in 2025, China's economy would grow about 80% faster than the US. It was predicting China would grow at 4.5%. Now it's predicting that China's economy will grow 8 times as fast as the US in 2025 because the US economy will slow down to 0.5%. That may be a bit exaggerated. It's not. We don't get hung up with the details of what if it's said. But what will happen is clear is that the China's growth lead over the United States will increase in 2025 because the US economy will slow down. It was going to slow down anyway, incidentally, because it had just been growing above trend due to its recovery from COVID. But no doubt the tariffs will make it slow down even more. And China's going to say it will suffer some damage. It will have to take some response to that. Doubtless, they will have to take some measures to deal with the question of threats of job losses, to redirect production, etc. But it's not going to greatly, hugely damage China's economy. That's one very firm response. And that's in the interest of the whole world because it's China's de facto not merely saying no for us, it's saying no to a unilateral system by the US. The second issue where they're debating it is the question of Europe. In Europe, the initial talk was not so bad. That was they were going to impose their own tariffs against the United States. And I think the United States understood that it had picked too many enemies to fight at once. And therefore, that's why it's put out this 90-day delay, since when the European Union has become a bit quieter. So we'll see what they do. Obviously, it would be disastrous from the point of view of the European population to accept what the United States wants, because we've already seen what they've done. I mean, Europe, after the end of the Cold War, had the chance to develop with peace across the continent, with economic development, and the sort of scenario you had in Asia since the end of the Cold War, where I mean, Asia, you had the Korean War, you had the Vietnam War, you had a terrible situation, and has now become both an area of peace and the most rapidly growing economic area in the world. Europe had that sort of choice at that time, and the United States was determined to wreck it because that would have made Europe a very powerful competitor to the United States. It would be good living standards for the working class of Europe, but a competitor for the United States. So it wanted to break off the relations between Russia and Germany so as to cut off Germany's energy supply. It wanted to cut off use of Chinese technology in Europe, such as Huawei, which means people like in my country, Britain, are now paying more for their 5G than they need to, and they're getting it later because Huawei, which is the world's best telecommunications supplier, has been cut out, etc. And the United States therefore created chaos in Europe. Well, is Europe going to stand up or not? We will see. I hope so. I'm not going to say anything which might not stop it, because I hope it will. I think it'll only be the pressure of the people of Europe that will make it stand up to the United States. You can also, therefore, you can also see this, for example, in the situation in Asia. The United States has made Trump today launched an attack on Xi Jinping because Xi Jinping's having a very successful visit to Vietnam. And the United States wanted to turn Vietnam and Southeast Asian countries against China. And they don't want it. I mean, the United States has been trying to create all sorts of problems now around Taiwan and around the South China Sea. And they will not have not succeeded because the countries there are very happy with the situation. I mean, yeah, they've got I don't everything's perfect. They've got some gripes at the moment, etc., etc. But the economy is growing strongly, and they don't want the situation to be disrupted. Canada initially made some quite strong responses. Again, it's become a little bit quiet since the US put the 90 days in, but we'll see what happens. If the world acted in a relatively united way, the United States would certainly be defeated. The attempt to impose this unilateral system would certainly be defeated. China has made its position clear. I hope we'll see what happens with Europe. We know what is going to happen with Canada. So we will see what's happened in that. What is the case is the position which China has taken is in the interests of the rest of the whole of the world. And China is in the fortunate position that it's a very strong country and able to take the lead in this. So we will have to see what happens in this process. But what will emerge out at the end is either maintenance of some type of multilateral system in which countries can continue to develop independently with all its imperfections. I'm not trying to say that the present situation is ideal, or it'll be a situation in which the United States has unilateral control over every decision, which really takes place in the international trading system. And that is what is at stake. It's not a technical question. It's a question of the future, which will impact literally every single person on the planet. And all progressive forces in the world need to understand that situation very clearly and oppose what Trump is doing.
Well, thank you, John, for those insights. I think you made it pretty clear that what is behind this discussion is not the mere protectionism of US international trade or a technical matter on tariffs for trade, but it is one more episode of the US struggle for shaping the world order in a context in which the declining power of the global north, and particularly the declining power of the US, represents a deadly threat for humanity. We'll be following these developments closely in the weeks to come. You've been listening to No Cold War's Perspective, where we bring you the pulse of the struggles for sovereignty, justice, and peace worldwide. Until next time, stay engaged, stay informed, and stay in solidarity. Thank you.